When India banned e-cigarettes, the global press reported a rejection of Philip Morris. Corporate momentum came to a crashing halt against an immovable barrier. Western media outlets packaged this event neatly. They flattened the historical and political layers to make the story easier to digest, framing a complex sovereign action as a simple trade dispute or a public health win. Philip Morris approached the table with an army of high-level lobbyists. They expected a standard negotiation, a trade-off where market access is purchased through investment and tax promises. The corporation ran its most effective global playbook, attempting to trade cash for entry. Instead of the usual compromise, they hit an impenetrable wall. A lobbying effort of this scale only fails when the dispute isn't actually about the money on the table. Its collapse points to a vastly more powerful structural force operating beneath the surface. To see why that lobbying machine failed, we must peel back the corporate PR and look at what the state was actually protecting. Philip Morris operated on the assumption they were entering a new consumer demographic. They actually stepped into a fortified, sovereign ecosystem. Analyzing this failure requires moving past standard economic models to investigate how a state actually secures its own survival. Behind the public health announcements lies a calculated strategy to protect the state's internal revenue. India's traditional tobacco market is a massive, deeply entrenched domestic industry. It relies on extensive human labor and generates a highly reliable, state-taxed revenue stream. This shows a closed fiscal loop. Domestic consumption generates legacy taxes. These flow into the state vault, paying for public hospitals and regulatory frameworks. The state relies on this continuous, unbroken cycle, a structural dependence that keeps national infrastructure running. The government was doing more than protecting lungs. It was fiercely defending the internal financial engine that pays for the hospitals treating those lungs. When corporate ambition enters a space where physical history and state context carry more weight than a bank balance, global leverage begins to fail. The state viewed e-cigarettes as a disruptive foreign variable. A new nicotine delivery system threatened to cannibalize essential tax revenue generated by the domestic legacy market. The response was a reflex to preserve the system. The machinery violently ejects the foreign threat to keep the domestic fiscal loop intact. Global corporations expect a negotiated settlement. A state defending its core survival mechanics offers no compromise. Lobbying capital cannot buy entry when the product itself threatens the state's primary mechanism for paying its own bills. This domestic economy operates far beyond formal retail. It is decentralized and woven directly into the daily physical rhythm of the streets. This street-level network is the physical manifestation of the structural addiction that funds the government's revenue. A century-old cultural and economic infrastructure cannot be overwritten by a standardized global spreadsheet. Phrases like market choice act as a linguistic mask. They are designed to replace a sovereign state's domestic financial addiction with an external corporate one. Faced with that exchange, India chose to keep the specific addiction that pays its own bills. This absolute rejection acts as a systemic shock for global corporate capitalism. A major nation prioritized its internal domestic context over the prestige of participating in the unified global market. The entity with the highest valuation holds no authority. Real leverage rests with whichever power controls the underlying fiscal reality. This rejection provides a blueprint for what happens when a state chooses preservation over participation. In an age where global systems attempt to flatten unique domestic histories into generic, compressed data points, India chose to defend its specific reality. Defending a physical market is an act of contextual sovereignty. It refuses to let domestic data and currency be absorbed into a generic global grid. If a nation fails to protect its structural context, a foreign corporation will gladly overwrite it. Global power is not defined by the ability to purchase entry into a new market. Absolute power lies in defending the specific, uncompromising history that built the market in the first place.